Welcome back to Warrior Canine Connections Unleashed series. As we mentioned last time, we not only want training to be fun and rewarding, but we want our dogs to engage their brains and practice problem solving. The method of training you're about to learn allows a dog to get comfortable with trying new behaviors without fear of getting it wrong. It may seem strange, but dogs actually need to learn how to learn. The more this is practiced, the better they'll get as their confidence in themselves grow. One of the really great aspects to this training method is that no matter what you're trying to teach, this step-by-step method can get you there. I do want to mention that this method relies pretty heavily on food motivation, so you're going to have to find a treat that your dog wants to follow. For our retrievers, they eat just about anything, but they do have a hierarchy of preferred snacks. It's important to find a few different brands that your dog is going to get excited about, but not overly excited. They still have to use their brains. After you have some training treats, we can start with the first stage of learning, a lure. A lure is the equivalent of a magnet for your dog's nose. With a treat in your hand, you will bring the treat lure to your dog's nose and slowly draw the path you want your dog to follow. The path is leading them to the position you are trying to train. This allows for a hands-off method of training and gives the dog complete control over where their body goes. No commands need to be given at this time. Let's look at a quick example, sit. This could be achieved by pushing your dog's rear down. However, what is really being taught is that the dog needs to cave to your hand pressure. Without the stimulus of your hand, the dog may or may not sit because nothing is forcing it to. When we lure the dog instead, they are choosing to do so themselves and no pressure cue is needed. I want to remind you that no training method is necessarily wrong. It is what works best for both you and your dog. Our dogs are being trained for veterans with mobility impairment, so we simply can't use physical means for their training. So how long do we stay at a lure phase? There is no exact set of repetitions. You want to use your best judgment and observe when it looks like your dog is breezing through the exercise. It almost looks like they're doing the movement before you fully lure them. Additionally, it is at this time that we start to cue the behavior with the command. We don't name the behavior prior to getting a reliable response to ensure that we are not naming an incorrect behavior. If we cued sit and the dog continually stood up, their definition of sit would be different than yours. I usually will start to say the word when the dog reliably offers the behavior 8 out of 10 times. It is fair to expect your dog to be at the lure phase for multiple sessions. We recommend a training session to be short, usually around 10 to 15 minutes for an older dog, and even shorter for a younger pup learning a new skill. Remember, dogs have short attention spans. You can and should have multiple sessions throughout the day, but giving them breaks between the sessions will allow for the learned content to actually be absorbed. Once you have successfully completed the luring phase, we can move on to a target. A target is essentially a hand gesture that mimics a lure path, but without food in your hand. We will still reward with food once the dog completes the action, but the treat will be in your bag until then. We need to wean the dog off some of this support, so this provides a less enticing but familiar action. They will also hear the cue that you previously paired with the lure, so it should help trace their memory. We then need to start pulling back some of the target if your goal is to have your dog respond to just a verbal cue. This needs to be done gradually. For example, I can begin to lessen how dramatic my hand is. So instead of drawing the target completely, I may only provide 70% of the target. This will then turn into 50%, and then 25%, and then 0% of a target. You want to draw the same path as you did with the lure. You will stay at this step for multiple repetitions. Be aware that we use our bodies way more than we really acknowledge. Did you notice how I stepped towards the dog as I was training? This needs to be gradually taken away too. If you have gone through this bit-by-bit process, you will have now reached the verbal stage. All physical cues have been removed and the dog can recognize and accurately respond to the cue given. Remain consistent with the word and tone chosen for the cue. Congratulations on teaching a new behavior. Lastly, let's look at treating intervals. I will always yes and treat a dog when they are learning something new, including the 3D's variables. That means you are rewarding every repetition in the lure and target phase. I am intermittent with food rewards when a dog has clearly learned a behavior and it is reliable on a verbal cue. For example, a 2-year-old dog that has practiced sit since they were 4 months old don't need a treat every time they do that behavior. However, if they sit as a soccer ball is getting kicked past them, they certainly earned a treat because that's one heck of a distraction. I will usually provide some form of praise like good or nice when treats aren't in the picture. Hey Rick, what are some other tips that you found helpful when you're instructing dogs?
Jen, thanks for sharing all of that great training information. One of the key words there is instruction. Instruct means to train, teach, or to direct. Let's talk about the tone or communication style that will work best in training your dog. Consider the main 3 styles of communication: passive, assertive, and aggressive. Asking your dog in a very polite, passive way to sit
Can you sit? Yeah, can you sit?
might seem very nice, but in reality, it will likely make it much more difficult for your dog to learn. Ordering your dog to sit in an aggressive tone
I said sit!
will likely have them wondering what they did wrong rather than trying to understand what you want them to do. To set you and your dog up for success, try using an assertive tone when you're giving your dog a command. Think of how a second grade teacher would sound if they were giving a new vocabulary word to their student. Try using your Arnold Schwarzenegger voice when you're giving the command down to your dog. Now be ready, as soon as your dog properly does that behavior, you need to immediately switch from that assertive tone to the praise tone. In other words, you have to practice going from Arnold Schwarzenegger to Richard Simmons. And that will help your dog understand both when they're being told to do something and how wonderful we think they are when they do it. Now remember that your dog can likely hear better than you can, so don't worry about being very loud. Just talk in a normal volume. Focus on getting your tone correct. Now your dog may have indeed heard you and may be pretending like they didn't. We'll talk about that next time. Jen, back to you.
Begin by slowly bringing the treat above the dog's head. The lure needs to start to move out of their sight to encourage them to draw their heads backwards, which will then encourage them to drop their tushes. When they are consistently sitting with the lure, you can then add the cue.
Sit. Yes.
We can then make it a little bit more challenging by losing the lure, but still using the same hand motion with the verbal cue.
Sit. Yes.
To make sure your dog starts to rely on the verbal cue instead of the hand cue, we'll start to fade away the hand gesture. You can see the trainer's range of motion decreasing as we progress.
Sit. Yes. Sit. Yes. Sit. Yes.
We also need to fade any other body cue that we're providing the dog. In this instance, there is a lean towards the dog. Watch how this is weaned off.
Sit.
You will then reach a point where you can stand directly in front of the dog with no other body cue and just the word given.
Holly. Sit. Yes.
For this lure, think about drawing a line that goes from their nose directly to the ground. Hold the lure closer to their chest as you draw the line to help ensure that they lay down completely. A dog will usually bow if the treat isn't tucked inwards enough. To reset your dog for the next repetition, you can use a word like okay or are you ready?
Down. Yes, good boy. Down. Yes, good job. Good work. Down. Yes.
As you lose the treat lure, remember to emphasize the tone that you have chosen for your command.
Down. Yes. There you go. Down.
Instead of drawing the full line to the ground, we're only going to draw about 50%, and then 25%,
Down.
and then 0%, but still using that same tone and command.
There you go. Down. Yes, good job. What a good boy. Down. Yes, good job. What a good boy. Good job, Goop. That's it. Yes.
We're now going to reverse the lure that we did for the down command. Instead of drawing a line down, we're going to draw a line up.
Ready? Sit. Yes, good. Sit. Yes.
Oh, we catching
You
on.
almost caught my hand. Oh, good. Ready?
As you target the dog upwards, you can also step towards the dog a little bit.
Sit. Yes, good. That's really good. Sit. Yes. Perfect. There you go.
Here we're doing a slight walk-in with a slight hand gesture upwards, but not nearly as dramatic as before.
You're really good at this. Sit. Yes, nice job, good. Sit. Good. Down. Yes, that's perfect. What a good job.
With your lure, draw a 360 circle nice and slow and tight to your dog's shoulder. Believe it or not, dogs have preferred sides, so if your dog isn't responding to one side, try the other side.
Spin.
Draw the full circle as you begin to target this behavior.
Spin.
When they're ready for it, you can target only about 3/4 of the circle or half of
Spin.
the circle.
Yes. Spin. Yes. Spin. Spin. Yes. Good girl.
My dog already knows the commands I want him to know. What can I do next?
Well, there are so many ways we can advance a simple command. We call them the 3 Ds: distance, duration, and distraction. These are 3 variables that we alter to ensure a dog is sound on a behavior. Refining each of these will make your dog polished and, quite frankly, look really impressive. Here's how we can take a simple behavior like down and advance it. If you're ready to practice these advancement variables, you want to implement the same bit-by-bit protocol. If I'm working on distance, we start at a close distance and gradually add a few more steps each repetition when the dog masters the initial distances. This happens over multiple training sessions as well. Keep in mind that every dog has its own strengths and weaknesses. Some dogs are much better with handling distractions, while others are much better with duration. When working on a variable, try to prevent the other variables from occurring. The moment multiple variables occur simultaneously, the training difficulty increases astronomically. This is a great challenge when the appropriate time arises, but until then, be fair to your dog and their level of learning. Smaller bits of learning will lead to greater success.
If I'm not supposed to repeat myself, what do I do if my dog's not responding right away?
There's so much benefit in waiting a dog out. Waiting your dog out for 5 to 10 seconds is fair. Some dogs have slower processing speeds and need that time to understand what was asked.
What if my dog gets stuck halfway through a behavior?
Just like humans, dogs benefit from a little coaching every now and again. If the dog has started behavior but aren't fully committing, we can encourage them to keep going. I like to use the motivational words, "that's it," or "you got it," to communicate that the dog is on the right path. If the dog offers a behavior that isn't correct, I might say, "nope," or "try again." I say this in a very neutral, non-emotional tone. This ensures that the dog doesn't feel any added pressure, but is still getting helpful feedback. Just like commands, use consistent coaching cues so they actually serve as information for your dog.
We hope you enjoyed our training videos intended to strengthen your Warrior Canine connection. We would appreciate it if you would provide feedback below and let us know how we're doing or share any suggestions you might have for upcoming videos.
If you need a puppy fix, go to warriorcanineconnection.org. Once you're there, scroll down and you'll see Puppy Cam. This will redirect you to the explore.org page.